All right, folks. One thing that I want to talk about really briefly that's part of my story that I didn't get into when I talked about my origin story is finding a mentor. Now, I lucked out, right? I did get a little bit of help from Greg as far as getting started. He gave me some pointers to kind of get things together, get the website set up, et cetera, et cetera. But as things went on, I needed somebody who could actually help me continue to level up, right? Somebody who could kind of fill in the gaps for me as I went through the process of running the podcast, growing the podcast, and things like that. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it's like anything else in life. You don't really know what the problems are until you run into them, and it makes it hard sometimes to actually know how to move ahead, right? And so setting up the website, that was pretty easy. I'm fairly technical. Finding equipment. I have to tell you about how I got my first microphone because I actually had it given to me by a company. I'll make a video about that later. But what equipment to use, how to get started, how to get artwork done, stuff like that. I just had no idea. And so Greg helped me get some of that set up. And then I was kind of out there on my own, and I don't know why I didn't reach back out to him when I had questions, but I didn't. I mean, I did sometimes, but not really. So what I wound up doing is I wound up listening to a few other podcasts about podcasting. And one of the ones that was out there at that time was by a guy named Cliff Ravenscraft. And you can find him out there. He's talking about other stuff now. He's not really big in the podcasting, how to podcast space. He still covers it as part of his show, but he talks about a bunch of other things. But at the time, he had a podcast about podcasting. It was Podcast Answer Man. And he basically answered questions about podcasts. And so I listened to his podcast, and then I would email him and ask him questions about how to do podcasts. And sometimes he'd actually answer me. The other thing, though, is that just by listening to him, a lot of times I found answers, or I could go find a podcast episode where he gave the answer. And so that was also extremely helpful and helped me kind of get my fingers around how podcasting actually worked. The only problem that I really ran into with a lot of it, though, was just that most of it wasn't extremely structured. And so I did wind up needing other mentorship, but I wound up finding that before too awful long because people started putting on podcasting events. And so I could actually go to Podcast Movement was one of the first ones. Now there's Podfest, and there are a bunch of other ones out there that you can go to. And by going to those, a lot of times then I could get the mentorship I needed just by showing up and asking the right questions. Cliff also wound up setting up, before Podcast Movement was really a thing, he wound up setting up a podcasters mastermind. And I joined that, and I was paying him every month to be a part of it. And that also helped because I was put in a position then where I could talk to other podcasters and get my questions answered. And I mean, these folks were all amateurs like me, but they had gone through different things than I had. And so I had the opportunity to actually jump in and, basically learn from them. So if I had a problem, I'd ask them a question. And, oh yeah, well, we ran into that with our stuff. And so, now we're dealing with that in a different way. And so, yeah, eventually what would happen is we'd solve each other's problems and help each other out. And so there are more or less three ways that I've kind of talked through here that I just want to put together. One is go out and actually consume content where people are talking about how to podcast and what problems they run into and things like that. The second place is to go find an expert and either pay them or reach out to them periodically and ask them questions. And the third way is go to podcasting events or find podcasting groups and ask questions there. One other place that I would recommend that wasn't around when I was doing it is there are at least 3 or 4 good Facebook groups that you can go to and ask questions in. And I'll have to go look those up and put those in the notes right down here. So you can go find those and join those, and they're awesome. And so you just get in and you're like, hey, look, I'm looking at these mics and I got a question as far as, pros and cons between this one and that one, right? And people give you their opinions. Oh, I used that one and I really like it. Or have you considered using this other one since you're a woman or because you have a really deep voice or something like that, right? Where, it adjust better to your range, or just stuff like that. And so as you're diving in, you can get a lot of feedback real quick on that stuff just by joining those groups. So I'll put all of that here in the notes on this particular video, and hopefully that helps you out a little bit. But yeah, then go find a mentor, go find help. You can reach out to me as well. My email address is actually chuck@devchat.tv, because devchat.tv is the podcast network I run. And yeah, hopefully that gives you some idea as far as how to get help and how to move forward with different kinds of mentorship that you can get. I'm also putting together videos that are paid videos that are essentially how-tos that I want to set up as kind of the next thing that you should try, or the next thing that you should do for your podcast. And I'm really focused on setup and tech and equipment as one area, right? So it'll probably be a walkthrough of a lot of the technologies or a lot of things to try. May also try some of the other apps out there that allow you to manage this stuff. Growth and monetization. So, whether that's selling your own products or doing sponsorships or things like that, which I've all done. So anyway, that's going to be the focus of that. You can go to mypodcastplaybook.com, and I should have that up here within the next week and have that ready to go for you so that you can actually, get in and start getting that material. So that's pretty much all I've got here. I'm going to wrap it up. Till next time, Max out.